In the heart of Montana, nestled among the rolling hills and the whisper of the wind through the pine trees, is the town of Bozeman, a community where neighbors know each other by name, where the air is crisp and the sunsets paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. But in the fall of 2003, a shadow was cast over this idyllic town, a shadow that would linger for nearly 2 decades. We begin in media res, the year 2023. The town is abuzz with disbelief, whispers of an arrest that has sent shockwaves through the community. A name that once evoked trust now sends shivers down spines. But to understand the magnitude of this moment, we must journey back to where it all began. In 2003, Emma Caldwell was a beacon of warmth and light. At 25, she was known for her infectious laughter and a smile that could brighten the darkest of days. Emma was a third-grade teacher at the local elementary school, adored by her students and respected by her peers. She lived in a modest, picturesque house on Maple Street, the kind with white picket fences and flower beds she tended with care. Emma was the kind of person who would spend her weekends volunteering at the community center, her evenings tutoring children who needed an extra hand. She had a close-knit group of friends, a loving family, and big dreams of writing a children's book one day. To those around her, Emma was not just a part of Bozeman, she was the heart of it. But then, on an ordinary Tuesday in October, Emma vanished. It was as if she had been plucked from the earth without a trace. She was last seen leaving school, waving goodbye to her students as she always did. Her car was found parked neatly in her driveway, her purse still inside. The driver's seat pulled close to the wheel just as she liked it. The only thing missing was Emma herself. The town rallied around her family, organizing searches and candlelight vigils. The police investigation began with vigor, but as days turned into weeks, leads grew cold, and hope began to flicker like a candle in the wind. Emma's disappearance baffled everyone. There was no sign of forced entry at her home. No struggle, no ransom notes or cryptic messages. She was simply gone, leaving behind a town desperate for answers and a family shattered by her absence. The initial 911 call came from Emma's mother, her voice trembling as she reported her daughter missing. "It's not like her," she insisted, tears choking her words. "Emma wouldn't just leave. Something's wrong. Please, you have to find her." As the call echoed through the dispatcher's headset, a chill settled over Bozeman, the kind that whispers of secrets buried and truths waiting to surface. And so, the story of Emma Caldwell's disappearance begins, a tale of mystery, heartache, and the long shadows cast by the past. But as the dust settled on that fateful day, no one in Bozeman could have predicted the revelation that would come to light 20 years later, nor the familiar face that would be led away in handcuffs, forever altering their perception of trust and betrayal. As the first chapter closes, the question remains, what happened to Emma Caldwell, and who in this tight-knit community knows more than they're telling? Emma Caldwell was more than just a beloved teacher in the quiet town of Bozeman, Montana. She was a force of nature, a vibrant soul whose laughter could light up even the darkest of days. Her life was a tapestry woven with threads of kindness, dedication, and a joy for life that was infectious to those around her. Growing up in Bozeman, Emma's roots ran deep. She was the kind of person who knew the names of her neighbors, remembered birthdays, and could often be found volunteering at the local animal shelter. In her mid-30s, Emma was single by choice, deeply independent and content with her life. Her students adored her. She had a knack for making history come alive, for turning textbook dates and events into vivid, unforgettable stories. Emma's passion for teaching was matched only by her commitment to her family. She was the eldest of 3 siblings, the one her younger brother and sister looked up to. Her parents, both retired educators, were proud of the legacy she was building, a legacy suddenly shrouded in mystery and despair. The day Emma disappeared started like any other. She woke early, brewed her favorite coffee, and took a moment to watch the sunrise, a ritual she cherished. That morning, Emma had a pep in her step, excited about the upcoming school play her class was rehearsing. She left for school with a smile, exchanging pleasantries with her neighbor, Mr. Thompson, as she always did. At school, nothing seemed amiss. Emma conducted her classes with her usual enthusiasm, her laughter echoing through the halls. But as the school day ended, Emma was seen leaving the building, her arms full of binders and books, headed for her car. She waved goodbye to a fellow teacher, her last known interaction before she vanished. The mystery deepened with the absence of any clear clues. Her car, parked in her driveway as though she had simply stepped out for a moment, offered no answers. Her purse, resting on the passenger seat, was untouched. The driver's seat, adjusted for her petite frame, indicated she was the last to drive it. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, worry began to seep into the hearts of those who knew her. Emma's mother, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, made the decision to call the police. The initial response was swift, the officers treating her disappearance as a priority. Flyers were posted, search parties organized, and yet every lead seemed to end in silence. The town of Bozeman was left in a state of unease, the kind that lingers in the air like a storm on the horizon. Rumors began to swirl, each more unsettling than the last. Was it an abduction? Had Emma left of her own accord, or was there something more sinister at play, hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly tranquil town? As the days passed, the investigation hit a wall. Each day without Emma felt heavier than the last, and her family clung to hope, their lives upended by the void her absence created. The community, once bustling with optimism, now moved with a quiet apprehension, each resident casting wary glances, wondering if the answer lay closer than they dared to imagine. And then, just as despair threatened to take hold, a new piece of evidence emerged, a discovery that would reignite the investigation and send shockwaves through the town. But before the truth could be revealed, it would take years of silence, a family's undying love, and a breakthrough that no one saw coming. The question remained, who knew the truth about Emma Caldwell's disappearance, and how long would it remain hidden in the shadows of Bozeman? The initial hours following Emma Caldwell's disappearance were a blur of frantic activity and rising tension. As the sun set on that fateful day, the Bozeman Police Department mobilized its resources. Officers combed through the neighborhood, knocking on doors, seeking any fragment of information that might illuminate Emma's sudden vanishing. Emma's mother, her voice trembling yet resolute, recounted her daughter's last known movements to Detective Callahan, a seasoned officer known for his dogged determination. She described Emma's routine, her friends, the places she frequented. Each word was a plea wrapped in hope, a desperate attempt to conjure her daughter's presence through sheer will. Neighbors reported seeing Emma earlier that afternoon, walking her usual route to the local library. A librarian recalled her checking out a stack of mystery novels, her smile bright and unassuming. But beyond that, the trail went cold. The police gathered these snippets, placing them on a board that quickly filled with questions and scant answers. Yet, in these critical first 48 hours, the investigation faltered. The urgency to act clashed with the pressure to do so methodically. A key witness, a jogger who might have seen Emma near the park, was dismissed too quickly, his testimony lost amidst the chaos of overlapping leads. The police, operating under the assumption that Emma might have left voluntarily, hesitated to declare it a potential abduction. This hesitation proved costly, allowing precious time to slip away. Emma's father, a man of few words and deep resolve, joined the search parties, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of his daughter. He held on to hope like a lifeline, even as doubt began to gnaw at the edges of his resolve. The community rallied, their efforts united but scattered, each corner searched, each call for Emma echoing into the stillness of the night. Meanwhile, the media seized on the story, their cameras capturing the raw emotions, the tearful pleas of a family desperate for answers. Reporters set up camp outside the Caldwell home, their presence both a source of comfort and a constant reminder of the dire circumstances. As the hours turned into days, the initial momentum of the investigation waned. Leads dried up, witnesses grew scarce, and the town settled into an uneasy quiet. The police, grappling with limited resources and mounting pressure, began to narrow their focus, looking inward for answers that seemed to elude them at every turn. And then, just as hope seemed poised to flicker out, a call came into the police station. A voice on the other end, hesitant but insistent, claimed to have seen something unusual the day Emma disappeared, something that could change everything. The question now was whether this new lead would finally shed light on the darkness that had enveloped Bozeman, or if it was merely another dead end in a case that felt increasingly unsolvable. The phone rang sharply. Slicing through the tense atmosphere of the police station, Officer Riley snatched up the receiver, his voice steady, albeit tinged with exhaustion. On the other end, a woman, her voice barely above a whisper, described a scene she couldn't shake from her mind. She had been driving past the park late that afternoon, the day Emma vanished. A car, an old blue sedan, was parked just off the main road, its hood propped open as if in distress. A man stood beside it, glancing around nervously. What caught her attention, however, was the passenger, a young girl who matched Emma's description, sitting stiffly in the back seat, her face turned away. Officer Riley jotted down the details, his pulse quickening. This was the most concrete lead they'd had since the search began. Yet as hope surged, so did apprehension. The initial hours of the investigation had been marred by missteps, and the weight of those early errors loomed large. The police had initially canvassed the park area, but their focus had been on footpaths and the woods beyond, not the peripheral roads where the sedan had been spotted. This oversight, driven by their assumption of a voluntary departure, had cost them valuable time, a realization that now hung heavily over the precinct. As Riley relayed the tip to Detective Martinez, a sense of urgency gripped the team. They needed to act swiftly, but there was no room for haste-induced errors. Each step had to be deliberate, each action precise. They dispatched officers to canvass the area once more, this time with a sharper eye for the sedan and any lingering traces it might have left behind. Meanwhile, the Caldwell family gathered in their living room, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Emma's mother, her face a mask of worry, clung to the hope that this new lead would bring her daughter back. Her father, stoic and silent, stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if willing Emma to walk through the door. Outside, the community continued their vigil, their efforts unwavering. The search parties, now more organized, combed through neighborhoods and open fields, their calls for Emma punctuating the quiet streets of Bozeman. Volunteers distributed flyers, their faces etched with determination, each poster a plea for help in finding the missing girl. Back at the station, Detective Martinez pored over the details of the case. The jogger's dismissed testimony nagged at him, a critical piece lost amidst the chaos. He resolved to revisit the witness, to listen with fresh ears and an open mind. Every lead, however tenuous, had to be pursued. As night fell, the station buzzed with activity, the officers driven by a shared resolve to right the early wrongs. The new lead, fragile as it was, held the promise of a breakthrough. Yet beneath the surface, doubt simmered. Had they lost their best chance in those first frantic hours? Or was this the turning point they so desperately needed? Outside, the town of Bozeman lay under a blanket of stars, the promise of a new day lingering in the chill air. For the Caldwell family, for the police, and for the community, the question remained: would this new lead unravel the mystery of Emma's disappearance, or would it slip through their fingers, another fleeting hope, in a case already fraught with heartache and uncertainty? The stillness of the Bozeman night was deceptive, a fragile calm masking the chaos within the police station. Detective Martinez, his mind a whirl of thoughts, picked up the phone with renewed determination. The jogger's account was his first port of call, a thread he hoped would not fray under scrutiny. The witness, a young man named Jake, recalled his morning run with precision now that he felt truly heard. He described the sedan again, noting a distinctive bumper sticker, partially torn but unmistakably vibrant against the car's dull paint. It was a small detail, but one that could break the case open. Detective Martinez scribbled furiously, his pen struggling to keep pace with Jake's recollection. Meanwhile, the Caldwell household was a microcosm of anxiety. Emma's mother, Mary, paced the room, her fingers clenching and unclenching as if holding on to hope itself. Her husband, Tom, remained rooted by the window, his eyes scanning the darkness as though willing Emma's silhouette to emerge from the shadows. Their son Ryan sat quietly, his face a mask of conflicted emotions, torn between optimism and fear. In the first 48 hours, the police operation had been a flurry of activity. Yet, amidst the urgency, critical errors had been made. Initial canvassing missed several key witnesses. The neighborhood surrounding the park where Emma was last seen had been left unchecked until hours later. Reports of a suspicious man seen lurking nearby went unnoticed, the officer's notes buried under a pile of paperwork. Detective Martinez, aware of these oversights, felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He knew that every minute counted, that each moment lost was a step further from finding Emma. Determined to rectify past blunders, he ordered a comprehensive review of all available footage from nearby traffic cameras. The chances were slim, but any glimpse of the sedan could provide a new direction. As morning light crept over Bozeman, the community rallied once more. Volunteers, undeterred by the previous day's setbacks, gathered at the Caldwell house, ready to expand their search. Their resolve was a beacon of hope, a testament to the town's unity in the face of uncertainty. Back at the station, Detective Martinez received a call that jolted him to attention. A local mechanic had come forward, claiming to have serviced a car matching the sedan's description just a week prior. The detail of the bumper sticker was key, a connection that could unravel the mystery. Martinez felt the first flicker of optimism, a fragile ember in the cold case's long shadow. As the morning unfolded, the path forward seemed clearer, yet fraught with challenges. Could this new lead finally illuminate Emma's whereabouts, or would they once again find themselves circling back to the beginning? The truth lay tantalizingly close, just beyond reach, waiting to be uncovered. Detective Martinez, with a renewed sense of urgency, drove to the mechanic's shop. The air was thick with anticipation as he stepped inside, where the mechanic, a grizzled man named Hank, awaited him. Hank's hands were stained with grease, but his eyes were sharp, focused. "I remember that car clearly," Hank began, his voice steady. "It had a distinctive bumper sticker, one of those Keep Bozeman weird ones. The owner seemed in a hurry, didn't want to stick around." Martinez leaned in, questioning every detail. "Do you recall anything about the driver? Anything at all?" Hank paused, recollecting. He was average height, wearing a cap that shaded his eyes, but there was something. He kept looking over his shoulder, like he was watching for someone. Martinez jotted down these details, aware that every scrap of information was vital. But as the days wore on, the lead began to fade into obscurity. The car was traced back to a rental agency, but the paperwork was muddled, the result of a clerical error. The driver's identity remained elusive, slipping through their fingers like sand. Back in Bozeman, whispers and rumors began to swirl through the community. Fear and suspicion bred conjecture, and soon the town was abuzz with speculation. Names were whispered behind closed doors, fingers pointed in hushed conversations. An old high school teacher, who had once mentored Emma, found himself at the center of unwanted attention. His eccentric behavior, once dismissed as harmless, now seemed sinister in light of recent events. "He's always been weird, you know," a neighbor confided to another, "always asking too many questions about the kids." The police, inundated with tips and theories, found themselves veering off course. Each new suspect brought a fresh wave of scrutiny, but with every investigation the trail went cold. The teacher, grilled under intense pressure, proved to have an airtight alibi. Others, too, were eventually cleared, leaving only more questions in their wake. At the Caldwell house, the atmosphere grew tense. Emma's parents, grappling with their own grief, found themselves at odds. The stress of the investigation frayed their once tight-knit bond. Ryan, feeling the strain of his parents' silent arguments, withdrew further, his room becoming a sanctuary from the chaos. As weeks turned into months, the case lingered unresolved. The initial fervor waned, and the community's united front began to fracture. The search parties dwindled, the media coverage dissipated. Emma's disappearance became a haunting memory, a ghost that loomed over Bozeman. Detective Martinez, despite the mounting pressure, refused to let the case slip into obscurity. He knew that somewhere in the tangled web of leads lay the truth. Determined, he revisited every piece of evidence, every witness account, searching for the one thread that could unravel it all. But as the first anniversary of Emma's disappearance approached, hope felt like a distant memory. The town, now accustomed to the absence, braced itself for another long, silent year. Yet beneath the surface, in the quiet determination of a few, the embers of hope still glowed, waiting for the spark that would reignite the search for answers. As the calendar marked 1 year since Emma's disappearance, a somber vigil illuminated the town square. Candles flickered in the evening breeze, their light casting long shadows over faces etched with sorrow and resignation. Among the gathered, Detective Martinez stood in silent contemplation, his mind a turbulent sea of unresolved questions. In the months following the teacher's exoneration, New suspects emerged, each theory more convoluted than the last. Whispers of a drifter seen in the area, a transient with a checkered past, sparked a fresh wave of speculation. The man, known only as Red, had been spotted near the outskirts of town, his presence enough to stir anxiety. Yet when questioned, his story of passing through en route to a distant relative's home checked out, and once again, the investigation hit a wall. Rumors like wildfire spread through Bozeman. Theories flourished in the fertile soil of fear and frustration. Some speculated about a cult, others about a trafficking ring operating under the radar. Each whisper added a layer of complexity, further obscuring the path to truth. Amid the chaos, Emma's family found themselves at the heart of a storm. The strain of unending uncertainty gnawed at the Caldwells, their once unshakable unity, now a fragile facade. Ryan, struggling with the weight of his sister's absence and his parents' discord, retreated deeper into himself, his silence a testament to his unresolved grief. In the police department, the mood was one of cautious optimism tempered by the harsh reality of a case gone cold. Detective Martinez, undeterred by the lack of progress, turned his attention to the minutiae, the overlooked details that might yet yield a breakthrough. His evenings were spent poring over maps, witness reports, and timelines, searching for a pattern, a connection that had eluded him thus far. Yet with each passing day, the trail grew colder. Leads that once seemed promising dissolved into dead ends, and the town, weary from the relentless cycle of hope and disappointment, began to turn away. Bozeman's collective attention shifted back to the rhythms of daily life, the memory of Emma's smile a poignant echo in their hearts. But for Detective Martinez, the case was far from closed. In the quiet solitude of his office, he replayed the events of that day, the last known moments of Emma's life, hunting for the elusive clue that would reignite the investigation. He knew that somewhere, buried beneath the layers of misdirection and false leads, lay the key to unraveling the mystery. As he reviewed the files one more time, a new name surfaced, a name that had been barely a footnote in the initial investigation. It was a name that sparked a fleeting recognition, a connection that had gone unnoticed. With renewed purpose, Martinez picked up the phone, his heart pounding with the possibility that this time the lead might just hold the answer he sought. Could this seemingly insignificant thread finally unravel the truth, or would it, like so many before, fade into the background of an unsolved mystery? Detective Martinez dialed the number with steady hands, though his heart raced with anticipation. On the other end, a voice answered, hesitant and cautious. The person was a former neighbor of Emma's family, someone who had moved away shortly after the disappearance. They exchanged pleasantries, Martinez carefully steering the conversation to the subject at hand. Emma's disappearance? Yes, I remember it well. The whole neighborhood was in shock for weeks. It was all anyone could talk about. Martinez leaned forward, sensing an opportunity. Anything unusual you recall from that time? Anyone who stood out? There was a pause, a pregnant silence that hinted at buried memories. Well, there was that one guy. Always seemed a little off, lived a few houses down. Kept to himself mostly, but I remember him because he was always out walking late at night. Martinez scribbled notes furiously. The neighbor's description was vague, but it was enough to warrant further investigation. Yet, as he dug deeper into this lead, the trail grew murky. The man in question had moved away, leaving little trace behind. His background checks yielded sparse information, and those who remembered him offered conflicting accounts. Meanwhile, whispers spread through Bozeman. The town's rumor mill churned with speculation, each story more outlandish than the last. Some claimed Emma had run away to escape a troubled home life, while others insisted on darker theories involving cults or human trafficking. These rumors, fueled by fear and imagination, only served to muddy the waters further. The community, desperate for closure, latched onto any tidbit that might explain the inexplicable, but for the police, these stories were distractions, tangents that led nowhere. With each passing month, the case slipped further from the public eye. Media coverage dwindled, and the once vigilant neighborhood watch disbanded. Emma's family too withdrew from the spotlight, their grief a private burden. Martinez, however, refused to let go. In his gut he felt the truth lingered just out of reach, but without new evidence, he was powerless to move forward. The investigation hit a wall, the promising lead dissolving into another frustrating dead end. The department, under pressure to allocate resources to more active cases, began to scale back their efforts. Colleagues, once eager to assist, now offered sympathetic smiles and gentle nudges towards closure. Yet, even as the investigation wound down, Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something, a crucial piece of the puzzle that lay hidden in plain sight. The town, once united in their search for Emma, slowly returned to normalcy, her absence a ghostly shadow in their midst. But for Detective Martinez, the case remained an open wound, a reminder of unfulfilled promises and unanswered questions. His resolve hardened. He vowed to keep searching, to peel back the layers of time and silence that obscured the truth. What had he overlooked? What secrets lay buried in the heart of Bozeman, waiting to be unearthed? As the seasons changed, so too did his approach, determined to reignite a flame that had nearly flickered out. In the quiet moments of solitude, he pondered these questions, knowing that somewhere someone held the key to unlocking the mystery that had haunted them all for far too long. The years passed, the seasons painting the town of Bozeman in hues of resilience and resignation. Emma's disappearance became a bitter legend whispered among locals, a cautionary tale for newcomers, a chilling story told to children to keep them close. Emma's family, once vibrant and integral to the community, had become reclusive. Her parents, Jane and Robert, wore their sorrow like a second skin. Every holiday, every birthday, served as a painful reminder of their missing daughter. They tried to move forward, to find joy in their remaining children and life's small pleasures, but the void Emma left was insurmountable. In their quiet moments, Jane and Robert would often retreat to Emma's room, preserved as it was the day she vanished. It stood as a shrine to happier times, a haven where they could still feel her presence. They clung to hope, however slim, that one day she would return to them, that the door would swing open, and this nightmare would end. Desperate for answers, they hired private investigators, pored over every piece of evidence they could access, and even turned to psychics, hoping for any glimmer of truth. Yet, each effort ended in disappointment, the truth remaining as elusive as ever. Their personal investigation, driven by love and despair, often led them down paths already trodden by the authorities, with no new revelations. The community, initially rocked by the tragedy, slowly began to move on. New families moved in, businesses opened and closed, and the passage of time softened the town's collective memory. Emma's case was filed away, both literally and metaphorically, as the town continued with its march towards the future. Detective Martinez, though, remained steadfast. He scoured through old files, revisited witness statements, and periodically reached out to Emma's family, offering a comforting presence and a reminder that someone still cared. His obsession with the case became a silent companion, a shadow that followed him through the years. Martinez often found himself revisiting the places tied to Emma's last known moments, hoping for inspiration, for something he might have missed. His conviction never wavered, sustained by the belief that justice was owed not just to Emma, but to her grieving family. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by stacks of dusty folders and faded photographs, Martinez pondered the scant evidence. He replayed conversations in his mind, scrutinized every alibi, every account of that fateful day, hunting for inconsistencies. It was during one of these solitary sessions, bathed in the dim glow of a desk lamp, that a thought struck him. An overlooked detail, a name mentioned in passing, long dismissed. His heart quickened with the thrill of possibility. Could this be the key he had been searching for, the missing piece that would unravel a decade's worth of silence? The question hung in the air, heavy with potential, as Martinez prepared to act on this fragile lead. Meanwhile, in the depths of Bozeman's history, the truth waited, patient and untold, ready to emerge from its cocoon of time. As the years melted into decades, the town of Bozeman underwent a transformation. Its skyline subtly altered, its streets bustling with new faces and stories. Yet for Emma's family, time stood still, each day a reflection of the last, punctuated by the haunting absence of answers. The community's collective memory of Emma's disappearance dulled, overshadowed by the exigencies of everyday life, but her parents, now graying and weary, clung fiercely to their quest for truth. Emma's mother spent countless hours sifting through her daughter's belongings, the faded scent of Emma's perfume, a bittersweet reminder of happier times. Her father, once a man of vibrant energy, had become a silent sentinel, his eyes perpetually scanning the horizon for any sign of resolution. Together they launched their own private investigation, hiring retired detectives, forensic experts, and even psychics in a desperate bid for closure. Each lead, however, ended in frustration, the trail cold and unyielding. The town, in its forward march, had largely forgotten the tragedy that once gripped it. New festivals and community events filled the void left by Emma's case, and the children who grew up hearing whispered tales of the missing girl had moved on, their lives untouched by the sorrow that lingered in the hearts of those who remembered. Detective Martinez, meanwhile, refused to let the case fade into obscurity. His dedication was a quiet but powerful force, a testament to his belief that justice, though delayed, was still attainable. The faint glimmer of a lead, a name, a detail overlooked, became his beacon. He methodically pieced together elements of the case, his mind a tapestry of connections waiting to be unraveled. The name that had surfaced in his thoughts belonged to a man who, at the time of Emma's disappearance, was a transient figure in the community. His presence had been brief, his departure unremarked upon, yet something about him now seemed significant. Martinez dug deep, searching through records and reaching out to contacts in neighboring states, hoping to trace the man's movements. As Martinez delved deeper, Emma's family found themselves pulled back into the vortex of hope and despair. The possibility of new information was both exhilarating and terrifying, a reminder of all they had lost and all they still stood to gain. They longed for the truth but feared the pain it might bring. In the quiet corners of Bozeman, where shadows of the past lingered, Martinez's investigation began to take shape, inching closer to answers long buried. The town, unaware of the unfolding drama, continued its dance with time, oblivious to the reckoning that lay ahead. As Martinez prepared to confront the man whose name haunted his thoughts, questions loomed large. Would this lead finally crack the case wide open, or would it dissolve like so many before, leaving only echoes of what could have been? The answer, shrouded in mystery, awaited just beyond the horizon, poised to disrupt the fragile peace of a town that had almost forgotten. The years rolled by with a predictable rhythm, each one blending into the next, as Bozeman seemed to collectively exhale, a town trying to outpace its own shadows. Emma's disappearance had become a tragic footnote in its history, a whispered cautionary tale for new generations. Yet for her family, time was a relentless reminder of absence, a persistent echo of what once was. Emma's parents, Tom and Linda, bore the weight of loss with a resilience forged in the crucible of grief. Their home, once filled with laughter and the vibrant chaos of family life, had grown quiet, a place where memories hung heavy in the air. They clung to hope in small acts, a candle lit in the window, a flower planted in Emma's memory, symbols of an enduring love that defied the passage of time. In the community, life unfolded with its usual rhythm. Graduations, weddings, and births marked the calendar, each event a testament to life's forward march. Neighbors who had once rallied around Emma's family gradually returned to the comforts of routine, their sympathies sincere, but their engagements fleeting. The case, for most, had become a story of the past, a cold case in every sense. Yet, beneath the surface of this quietude, lay a simmering frustration within the family. Tom, ever the pragmatist, had taken it upon himself to pursue leads that the official investigation had overlooked or deemed irrelevant. He pored over every detail, every report, his nights consumed by the glow of a computer screen, searching for patterns invisible to the untrained eye. Linda, meanwhile, sought solace in community advocacy, working tirelessly to ensure that no family would ever feel as isolated as they once had. Their son, Jake, now grown, had been shaped by the void left by his sister, driven by a need to understand the world that had taken her away. He pursued a career in law, his choice both a tribute to her memory and a pursuit of justice in a world where it often seemed elusive. The case that had defined his family became a silent partner in his life, a constant reminder of the fragility of safety. Detective Martinez, steadfast in his pursuit, found himself navigating the complexities of a case that had long gone cold. His own life had changed, promotions, a family of his own. But Emma's case was a thread he could not cut. The name, the man who had slipped through the cracks, was more than a lead. He was a specter that haunted his professional conscience. Martinez's persistence was fueled by the belief that no crime should remain unsolved, no family left without answers. In the backdrop, the town of Bozeman continued to evolve, its landscape shifting with new developments and the influx of families drawn to its serene beauty. Yet within these changes, the past lingered. There were those who still remembered the girl whose smile had once brightened their community. They watched from the periphery, hoping for closure, even as the years stretched on. As the community moved on, the silence around Emma's case was occasionally pierced by rumors and speculation, by the whispers of those who claimed to know more than they let on. Each new whisper was a ripple in the pond, a reminder that time does not erase all traces of the past. The quiet determination of Emma's family and the relentless pursuit by Detective Martinez was a testament to a truth that many in Bozeman had forgotten, that some mysteries demand to be solved, that some stories refuse to end until the final chapter is written. The question that loomed over them all was whether they would find the answers they sought, or if the silence would continue to stretch into infinity, leaving only shadows and memories in its wake. The passage of time often dulls the sharp edges of grief, but for Emma's family, the years only deepened the void she left behind. Her parents, once vibrant members of the Bozeman community, now lived in a world punctuated by quiet birthdays and anniversaries marked by absence. They clung to each other and the fading hope that justice might someday arrive. In their home, a room remained untouched, a shrine to a life interrupted. Emma's mother, with a steely determination, had turned to private investigation firms when the official inquiry grew cold. She gathered newspaper clippings, attended conferences, and networked with anyone who might hold a key to unlock the mystery. Her father, silent in his grief, supported her efforts but found solace in more private rituals, tending to the garden Emma had loved, maintaining the family's traditions, trying to preserve a semblance of normalcy. The community of Bozeman, while outwardly moving on, held the story of Emma's disappearance like a scar. New families arrived, unaware of the history beneath the picturesque surface of their new home. For the older residents, however, the mystery lingered like a ghost at the edge of every celebration, every town meeting. They whispered about the case in hushed tones, their voices carrying a mix of fear and unresolved tension. Over the years, Detective Martinez's name became synonymous with the quest for truth. His dogged pursuit of Emma's case was both admired and pitied by his peers. Many saw it as a noble but impossible endeavor, a tilting at windmills that consumed his career. But Martinez held onto every shred of evidence, every witness statement, believing that buried within the pages of dusty files lay the answer. The years brought advancements in technology, forensic science making leaps that seemed almost miraculous, yet the breakthroughs that might have once seemed like silver bullets remained tantalizingly out of reach for this case. Emma's mother seized upon each new development, writing letters to labs and experts, always advocating for her daughter, never letting Emma become just another statistic. The long silence surrounding the case was occasionally broken by renewed media interest, an anniversary piece, a national segment on unsolved mysteries. Each time, hope surged briefly, then waned, a cycle that left Emma's family emotionally exhausted but resolutely standing firm. Then came the whispers, subtle at first, like the rustling of leaves on a still night. Rumors of a new lead, an anonymous tip that had reached Detective Martinez's ears. The town buzzed with speculation. Was someone coming forward? Had there been a confession? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the community held its breath. Martinez, ever cautious, knew the weight of false hope, but also the power of perseverance. He found himself in the archives once more, piecing together the puzzle with a fresh perspective brought by years of contemplation and a new piece of information that had surfaced from the depths. What if the answer was simpler than they had all assumed? What if it had been hiding in plain sight all along? The silence of the past was about to be shattered, and as the tension mounted, one question remained. Would this be the revelation they had all prayed for, or just another turn in an endless maze? As the whispers grew louder, the community found itself suspended in a delicate balance of hope and skepticism. Detective Martinez, now a seasoned investigator, had always been haunted by the image of Emma, her bright eyes staring back from faded photographs. He knew the weight of the unsolved case, both a personal and professional shadow that lingered over Bozeman. It was one crisp autumn morning, when the first frost had begun to glaze the Montana landscape, that a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, unassuming, but inside was an invitation to a symposium on forensic advancements. Martinez felt a flicker of curiosity. At the heart of the symposium was a talk on genetic genealogy, an emerging technology that had already begun solving cases long thought unsolvable. The presentation was riveting. Scientists explained how DNA, once thought to hold only limited potential in cold cases, could now be used to trace familial lines and identify suspects with astonishing precision. Martinez listened intently, his mind racing through possibilities. Could this be the breakthrough he'd been waiting for? Returning to Bozeman, he wasted no time in contacting the forensic lab. The possibility of applying genetic genealogy to the evidence collected from Emma's case was both thrilling and daunting. The samples, meticulously preserved, held the potential to unlock secrets that had eluded them for 2 decades. Emma's mother, ever vigilant, was the first to learn of the new development. Her heart surged with cautious optimism. She had spent years clinging to hope, and now at last there seemed to be a tangible path forward. The community, too, began to sense a shift, an undercurrent of anticipation that rippled through the town. As the lab began its work, Martinez found himself pacing the corridors of the station, his mind a whirlwind of what-ifs. Days turned to weeks, each one marked by a new set of questions. Would the DNA match anyone in the databases? Could this be the key to finally bringing Emma justice? Then, the call came. The lab had identified a familial match. The DNA sample, once a silent witness to the crime, now spoke with clarity. It linked to a family with deep roots in Montana, a name that had been whispered in connection to the case but never proven. Until now. Martinez felt a surge of adrenaline. The name was familiar yet unexpected, a figure who had blended into the fabric of the community, unremarkable and unassuming. As the reality sank in, so did the gravity of what lay ahead. The pieces were aligning, but caution tempered his excitement. There was more work to be done, more questions to be asked, more truths to be uncovered. The breakthrough was monumental, yet it posed its own set of challenges. How would the community react? What would this mean for Emma's family, who had endured so much? And most importantly, would this lead to the arrest they had all been waiting for? Or would it unravel into another layer of complexity in a case that had already defied easy answers? In the quiet aftermath of the revelation, Martinez knew the path forward was fraught with both promise and peril. The next steps would be crucial, each decision a potential turning point in a case that had long been shrouded in mystery. As he prepared to move forward, one question loomed larger than any other. Would justice finally be served for Emma, or would the truth remain just out of reach? As Martinez stood in the dimly lit office, the weight of the revelation pressed heavily on his shoulders. The name that had emerged from the depths of the DNA database was one that had been part of Bozeman's very fabric. Robert Langford, a local businessman known for his involvement in community events, someone who'd never been more than a passing mention in the initial investigation. The familial match pointed toward Langford's lineage, suggesting that the answer lay within the DNA of a family member. Somewhere within their bloodline, the truth lay buried, waiting to be unearthed. Martinez knew this was the moment that could either make or break the case. He needed to approach the situation delicately, ensuring no stone was left unturned. He called for a meeting, gathering his team in the conference room, where the walls were lined with photos and documents from the case. The air was thick with anticipation as he laid out the plan. They would need to discreetly gather DNA samples from the Langford family, ensuring they had a direct link to the individual responsible. This would require precision and discretion. The last thing they needed was to alert the suspect. As the team dispersed to carry out their assignments, Martinez felt a flicker of determination light within him. The breakthrough had reignited a sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope that justice could finally be served. Meanwhile, Emma's family was cautiously optimistic. They had learned to guard their hearts against false hope over the years, Yet this new development was hard to ignore. Emma's mother, Margaret, felt a bittersweet relief wash over her. She had spent countless nights praying for answers, and now, as the possibility of closure loomed closer, her emotions were a complex tapestry of grief, hope, and longing. Back at the station, the atmosphere was tense yet charged with an unspoken energy. The application of genetic genealogy to the case had opened new avenues, each lead a potential thread that could unravel the mystery. Martinez knew the clock was ticking, and every moment counted. As the team worked tirelessly, they discovered that Robert Langford had an estranged brother, David, who had left Bozeman under mysterious circumstances just months after Emma's disappearance. This revelation added a new dimension to the investigation. Could David hold the key to the truth? And if so, where was he now? The search for David Langford began in earnest, with investigators combing through records, tracking down acquaintances, and piecing together his life since leaving Bozeman. It was a race against time, and the stakes had never been higher. With every passing day, the pressure mounted. The community, once a tranquil backdrop to this unfolding drama, was now a cauldron of speculation and unease. Whispers of the Langford name began to circulate, and Martinez knew they needed answers before rumors spiraled out of control. As the team closed in on David's whereabouts, a new layer of urgency emerged. What if David had been hiding in plain sight all these years, living a life unmarred by his past? And what would happen when the truth finally came to light? The investigation had reached a critical juncture, and Martinez felt the weight of the town's hope resting squarely on his shoulders. With each new discovery, the path forward seemed clearer yet fraught with peril. The truth was within reach, but it demanded courage to grasp it fully. And so, as the sun set on another day in Bozeman, Martinez prepared for the next step in their relentless pursuit of justice. The end was in sight, but the journey was far from over. Would the new lead bring them closer to the truth, or would it unravel into yet another unsolved mystery? The morning sun cast a golden hue over the sleepy town of Bozeman, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within its borders. Martinez sat in the cramped confines of his office, surrounded by stacks of files and photographs that chronicled nearly 2 decades of unanswered questions. The case had taken on a life of its own, consuming him and his team in a relentless quest for clarity. A sudden knock on the door broke his reverie. It was Detective Sarah Brenner, a recent transfer from Chicago, known for her tenacity and fresh perspective on cold cases. She had heard of the Bozeman case, and it intrigued her. Brenner had a reputation for seeing what others missed, and her arrival on the scene promised a new chapter in the investigation. Detective Brenner wasted no time. She dove into the labyrinth of evidence, her eyes scanning for anomalies, her mind connecting dots that seemed disparate. Her attention soon turned to the forensic reports, a cornerstone of the initial investigation, but now potentially outdated. It was here that she saw an opportunity. Martinez, curious about Brenner's approach, watched as she meticulously reviewed the evidence. She paused, considering a report on a piece of fabric found at the scene, one that had been overlooked due to the limitations of early 2000s technology. Brenner proposed a bold strategy, applying cutting-edge genetic genealogy technology to the old evidence. This was a relatively new field, a fusion of DNA analysis and genealogical research that had solved cases long considered hopeless. Martinez felt a flicker of hope, a light in the darkness that had pervaded the case for so long. With the team's approval, the fabric was sent to a specialized lab. Days turned into weeks, each one filled with anticipation and the quiet dread of yet another dead end. The town held its collective breath, waiting for a breakthrough that might finally bring peace to the restless spirits of Emma and the community. Then one crisp autumn morning, the call came. Brenner answered, her expression a blend of disbelief and triumph. The lab had identified a familial match, a connection to the Langford family. But it wasn't Robert or David. It was a relative no one had considered, a cousin who had lived quietly on the outskirts of Bozeman, far from the prying eyes of the investigation. This revelation sent shockwaves through the team. How had they missed this connection? And why had this cousin never come forward? The implications were staggering, and the urgency to find this individual grew with every passing moment. The town, once simmering with suspicion, now buzzed with the possibility of closure. But as the investigation honed in on this new suspect, questions loomed large. What was the cousin's role in Emma's disappearance? Was he the key to unraveling the tangled web of deceit and silence that had enveloped the Langford family for years? Martinez and Brenner knew they were on the precipice of a major breakthrough. The truth, long obscured by time and fear, was within their grasp. But as they prepared to confront this newfound suspect, they understood that the final chapters of this saga would demand not just answers, but courage to face the consequences of the past. The community's hope hung in the balance, and the path forward was fraught with danger and uncertainty. Would the cousin's story finally unlock the secrets of that fateful day in 2003, or would it lead them deeper into a mystery that refused to be solved? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be uncovered. The clock ticked relentlessly as Martinez and Brenner gathered the team for an urgent briefing. The atmosphere in the room was charged with a mix of excitement and caution. They were on the verge of a breakthrough, but the road to truth was fraught with potential missteps. Martinez spoke first, his voice steady but laced with tension. "We have a familial match to the Langford family, but it's not from the immediate circle we focused on for years. This cousin, his name is James Langford, was never on our radar. He lived quietly, away from the spotlight, but close enough to know the family's secrets." Brenner took over, her eyes scanning the room, ensuring everyone understood the gravity of the situation. "James has a history of staying off the grid. Little to no digital footprint, and he's managed to keep a low profile all these years. But the DNA doesn't lie, the match is strong." The team absorbed the information in silence, the weight of their mission settling over them. It was Brenner who broke the silence, her voice carrying the determination of someone who had waited too long for this moment. "We need to approach this methodically. We can't afford to spook him. Any misstep could send him underground, and we'll lose our chance." The team nodded, understanding the delicate balance they had to maintain. As they discussed their next moves, Martinez's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting from focused to alarmed. "It's the lab," he said, excusing himself. He stepped into the hallway, his voice low but urgent as he spoke into the phone. Moments later, he returned, his face a mask of grim determination. "They found something else," Martinez announced, drawing all eyes to him. "There's a partial fingerprint from the crime scene that matches James. It's old, degraded, but it's enough for a warrant. We can bring him in." The room erupted in a mixture of relief and renewed energy. It was the break they needed, the tangible evidence connecting James to the scene. But with this breakthrough came the daunting task of confronting him, and the questions that still loomed. Brenner's voice cut through the excitement, bringing the team back to focus. "We move quickly but carefully. We need to understand his motive, his connection to Emma. And most importantly, we need to ensure that justice is served, not just for Emma, but for the community that's waited so long for closure." As the team dispersed to prepare for the next steps, the tension in the air was palpable. They were on the cusp of unraveling a mystery that had haunted them for years, but the path ahead was uncertain. Would James Langford hold the answers they needed? Or was he just another piece in a puzzle more complex than they imagined? The sun began to set, casting long shadows over Bozeman, a town poised on the edge of revelation. The truth was within reach, but as the team steeled themselves for the confrontation, they knew that the story of Emma's disappearance was far from over. As the team gathered their thoughts and prepared to bring in James Langford, the atmosphere in the room was charged with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. They knew that this moment was pivotal, not just for the investigation, but for the entire community that had been left in the dark for 2 decades. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a twilight glow over Bozeman as they moved swiftly yet cautiously. They knew that any misstep could cost them the opportunity to finally close the case that had eluded them for so long. Martinez, still reeling from the call, reviewed the details once more. The partial fingerprint, though degraded, was their strongest piece of evidence yet. It was a breakthrough that tied James to the scene, but it wasn't enough on its own. They needed more, something that could withstand scrutiny in court. Brenner's voice broke through the tension. "We need to dig deeper into James's history, his connections, his movements, everything. There's got to be more that links him to Emma." The team nodded in agreement, and as they dispersed, each member knew their role in this critical phase. Time was of the essence, They had to work quickly to build a solid case that would not only lead to an arrest, but also secure a conviction. As the clock ticked, Martinez and Brenner sifted through the archives, looking for any mention of James in relation to Emma. Their eyes scanned old newspaper clippings, police reports, and witness statements from 2003. It was a painstaking process, but they were determined. Meanwhile, in the lab, the forensic team worked tirelessly, re-examining every piece of evidence with fresh eyes. Their efforts were soon rewarded when they discovered a hair sample previously overlooked. It was a tiny strand, but with modern DNA technology, it could be the key to unlocking the truth. Back in the investigation room, Brenner received an update from the lab. The DNA results were in, and they matched James Langford. It was the confirmation they needed, a direct link between James and the crime scene. The pieces were finally coming together. Martinez, feeling the weight of the moment, addressed the team. "This is it. We have enough to bring him in, but we need to do it right. We can't afford any mistakes." The plan was set. They would approach James with the evidence, hoping to elicit a confession, but as they prepared for the confrontation, a nagging question lingered. Why would James, a seemingly ordinary man, commit such a heinous act? What drove him to target Emma? As the team moved into position, ready to confront the man at the center of their investigation, the air was thick with suspense. Each step brought them closer to the truth, yet the path was fraught with uncertainty. The door to James Langford's modest home loomed large as they approached, the weight of years pressing down on their shoulders. Would he reveal the secrets that had remained buried for so long, or would he take them to his grave? The answer was just moments away, and the town of Bozeman held its breath, poised on the brink of revelation. The team stood outside James Langford's door, the chill of the Montana air biting through their resolve. Martinez glanced at Brenner, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. This was their moment. Brenner gave a nod, and Martinez rapped on the door with authority. Inside, the sound of approaching footsteps was muffled by the thick wooden door. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. Finally, the door swung open, revealing James Langford, his expression a mix of surprise and wariness. Martinez spoke first, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of urgency. "James Langford, we need to talk to you about Emma Carter." James's face twitched, an involuntary reaction that Martinez didn't miss. He gestured for them to enter, the hesitation in his movements betraying the storm of emotions underneath his calm exterior. Inside, the house was modest, filled with the kind of personal touches that spoke of a life unassuming and ordinary. Yet, the tension in the room was palpable as Martinez and Brenner took their seats, laying out the evidence with methodical precision. Brenner leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. "We have DNA evidence, James. It links you directly to the scene where Emma disappeared. We need you to explain how that's possible." James's eyes flickered, his mind racing for an explanation. The silence stretched, each ticking second hammering the gravity of their accusation into the room. Finally he exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for any of this to happen." The confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. Martinez pressed on, his tone gentle but insistent. "Tell us what happened, James. We need to know why." James's gaze dropped to the floor, as if the truth was buried beneath the worn carpet. "It was an accident. I was just trying to scare her. She wasn't supposed to get hurt." Brenner exchanged a quick glance with Martinez, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "Why Emma, James? Why target her in the first place?" James hesitated, the weight of his secret nearly tangible. "I knew her father. We had a disagreement. I thought if I scared Emma, he'd back off. But it all went wrong." As the confession spilled forth, the tension in the room shifted, tinged now with a mix of disbelief and empathy. Martinez and Brenner listened intently, piecing together the narrative that had eluded them for so long. Outside, the quiet streets of Bozeman remained still, unaware of the seismic shift occurring within James Langford's modest home. For years, the town had been haunted by Emma's disappearance, the unanswered questions casting a long shadow. Now, with James's words, the fog began to lift. Yet the revelation was bittersweet, the truth a double-edged sword. It answered questions, but opened wounds anew, the scars of the past re-emerging to the surface. As Martinez and Brenner prepared to leave, The weight of their discovery settled heavily on their shoulders. The journey to justice was far from over, but with James's confession, the path was finally clear. The town of Bozeman, poised on the brink of resolution, braced itself for the impact of truth. And as the door closed behind them, the team knew that the final chapters of this harrowing saga were yet to be written. The echoes of Emma Carter's story reverberating through the community and beyond. Outside, the windswept streets of Bozeman whispered secrets that had lingered too long in the shadows. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of triumph and somber reflection. The confession had provided clarity, yet left them grappling with the stark reality of James Langford's true nature. James Langford, the local handyman, always ready to lend a helping hand, his smile a fixture at community gatherings. He was the man who volunteered at the church, organizing Sunday school picnics, his presence a comforting constant in a town where familiarity was cherished. Neighbors would often see him tending to his garden, waving amicably as they passed by, never suspecting the darkness lurking beneath his genial facade. As Martinez and Brenner reviewed James's statement, the painstaking effort of connecting dots became a testament to their unwavering pursuit of justice. It was an accidental discovery during a routine check that had first drawn suspicion. A match of fibers found in Emma's case to ones found in James's tool shed, a seemingly innocuous detail that cracked open the door to investigation. James had lived undetected, his secret life meticulously hidden, the truth of Emma's disappearance buried beneath layers of normalcy. The revelation that he had targeted the innocent girl due to a vendetta against her father was a chilling reminder of how personal grievances could spiral out of control, ensnaring the innocent in their wake. The town was reeling. Trust, once given freely, was now tainted with suspicion. The realization that one of their own had harbored such a dark secret left residents grappling with a collective sense of betrayal. How had they missed the signs? Could they have prevented the tragedy if they had looked closer, questioned more? As the warrant for James Langford's arrest was finalized, the task force moved with a precision honed over years of unresolved cases. His capture was swift, orchestrated to minimize the community's shock. Yet the news spread with the swiftness of wildfire. Phones buzzed and whispers grew into a chorus of disbelief and outrage. The image of James being led away in handcuffs was a jarring contrast to the man they thought they knew. His head hung low, the weight of his actions finally visible in his slumped shoulders, as if the burden of the secret he carried all these years had finally become too heavy to bear. In the quiet aftermath of his arrest, Bozeman found itself at a crossroads. Emma's story, once a suffocating mystery, was now a narrative of caution and reflection. The townspeople gathered in small circles, voices low but urgent, the need to comprehend overpowering their disbelief. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fading gold, the community braced itself for the coming days. The trial, the media frenzy, the mourning for a life stolen too soon, all lay ahead. But for now they clung to the hope that with the truth laid bare, healing could finally begin. The air was thick with anticipation as the final chapter of this saga loomed on the horizon. The echoes of the past would soon find their resolution, and the town of Bozeman would have to learn to trust again, to rebuild from the ashes of deceit. And as the night enveloped the town, one question lingered, weaving through the rustling leaves and quiet streets. What other secrets lay hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered? The following morning, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters and townsfolk alike, all eyes fixed on the proceedings that promised to shed light on the darkest corners of their town's history. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, the air charged with anticipation and unease. During the interrogation, James Langford sat across from the lead detective, a table separating his past from the truth that was about to be unearthed. His demeanor was a mix of resignation and relief, as if the weight of years spent hiding had finally been lifted. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of a clock, counting down to the moment when words would replace silence. "I didn't mean for it to happen," James began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, she trusted me. We were just talking that night, like we always did, but something changed." His words trailed off, choked by emotion and remorse. He paused, collecting himself, before continuing with a confession that painted a picture of a man driven by impulse, regret, etched into each syllable. The courtroom listened, rapt, as details of that fateful night in 2003 unfolded. The truth was more heart-wrenching than anyone had imagined. Emma had been a beacon of hope and light, and James, blinded by his own internal struggles, had extinguished that light in a moment of weakness. As the confession concluded, the courtroom sat in stunned silence, the gravity of his words lingering in the air. Justice, at long last, seemed within reach, but it came at a cost that could never truly be repaid. The trial moved swiftly thereafter, the evidence irrefutable, the verdict a foregone conclusion. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, a resounding affirmation of the community's collective grief and resolve. Sentencing followed, with James receiving life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Emma's family, the verdict was a bittersweet closure, a sense of justice tempered by the enduring ache of her absence. They spoke at the sentencing, their voices a mixture of sorrow and strength, urging the community to remember Emma not just for how she died, but for how she lived, full of laughter, dreams, and kindness. In the aftermath, Bozeman began the slow process of healing. The community, once fractured by suspicion and uncertainty, found solace in unity. Memorials to Emma sprang up around town, reminders of her spirit and the lessons learned from her tragic fate. Conversations shifted from whispers of fear to dialogues of prevention and awareness, ensuring that her story would serve as a beacon for future generations. The town, forever changed, embraced a newfound vigilance, a commitment to protect its own from the shadows that had once loomed so large. And as time marched on, the memory of Emma Patterson lived on in the hearts of those who loved her, a testament to resilience and the enduring quest for justice. In reflection, the town of Bozeman recognized that while justice had been served, the journey was far from over. The scars left behind would serve as a reminder of the fragility of trust and the strength found in community. Emma's legacy became a rallying cry, a poignant reminder that in the pursuit of truth, no secret could remain hidden forever. Thus, Bozeman stood at the dawn of a new chapter, forged in the fires of loss, but guided by the light of hope and remembrance. The echoes of the past, now silenced, made way for a future where vigilance and empathy would ensure that no other family would endure the same heartache. As the seasons changed, so too did the town, ever mindful of the shadows, yet unyielding in its resolve to cherish and protect its own.